Summer in their small suburban home smelled of freshly cut grass and the flowers Lana had planted along the white picket fence. Mornings began with soft light streaming through lace curtains and the sound of the coffee machine hissing like a cat awoken. Lana, in a light cotton dress, moved around the kitchen with the grace honed by years. Her movements were fluid, almost dance-like chopping vegetables for an omelet, wiping invisible crumbs from the marble countertop, straightening a vase of daisies. Everything in the house, from the perfectly ironed towels to the sparkling glasses in the sideboard, screamed of her efforts. She was a model wife, and no one would suspect that her name was once Leela, and she danced in the dim light of a club where men paid for her smile. "Lan, are you working on the stove again this morning?" Eric's, her husband's, voice was warm, slightly hoarse, as if he had just woken up. He entered the kitchen, adjusting his tie, which he always tied a little crooked. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and his eyes were still filled with morning laziness. Lana turned around, holding a wooden spatula in her hands, her lips forming a soft smile, the one that made Eric feel at home no matter where he was. "How else? You won't go on your business trip on an empty stomach." She bowed her head slightly, and a light curl fell on her shoulder. "Sit down. Everything will be ready in a moment." Eric plopped down on a chair, reached for the newspaper lying on the table, but immediately put it down, noticing how Lana deftly flipped the omelet in the frying pan. "You know, sometimes I think it was a shame you left dancing. You still have those moves." As if the stage was beneath you, he grinned, winking. Lana froze for a split second, but then laughed loudly, almost sincerely. "Oh, don't start. Dancing is a thing of the past. Now my stage is this kitchen, and you know, I'm not complaining." She placed a plate of omelet garnished with a sprig of parsley and a cup of coffee with aromatic steam rising from it in front of him. Eric inhaled the scent, closing his eyes. "You're a sorceress, Lan. If it weren't for you, I'd probably still be eating dumplings from the supermarket. And tell him I saved you from a life of bachelorhood." She playfully poked him in the shoulder, sitting down across from him with a cup of herbal tea. Her eyes, blue as the July sky, watched him closely, but there was something else in them, a shadow that Eric had never noticed. They ate, chatting about small things, how their neighbor had forgotten to turn off the lawn mower at night again, how the light bulb in the hallway needed to be changed, and his upcoming trip. Eric was an engineer, specializing in bridge building, and every summer he was sent on business trips, sometimes to a neighboring town, sometimes hundreds of miles away. This time he had a 3-week project in a seaside town, inspecting a new bridge. "3 weeks, Lan. Not that long," he said, sipping his coffee. "You can manage without me, right? The garden, the house, all this." He gestured around the kitchen, as if encompassing their entire cozy world. Lana nodded, her smile warm, almost maternal. "Of course, I can handle it. You know I like it when everything is under control. Just don't forget to call when you arrive, okay? Otherwise, I'll worry." "I promise." Eric stood up, kissed her forehead, and reached for the suitcase that was already waiting by the door. "Are you sure you don't want to come with me? The sea, the sun, fresh oysters." Lana shook her head, her smile growing a little wider, but a barely noticeable tension flickered at the corners of her lips. "No, someone has to look after your roses. They'll be lost without me." He laughed, picked up his suitcase, and walked to the door. Lana walked him to the threshold, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, while Eric loaded the car. Summer was a warm breeze around her, and she seemed part of this perfect morning, beautiful, calm, loving. "Call me if anything happens," Eric shouted, already getting behind the wheel. "Of course," she replied, waving. Her smile was picture perfect, but as the car turned the corner and the sound of the engine faded, her face changed. The smile slowly slipped, like a mask she had been wearing for too long. Her eyes, warm and soft just a moment ago, took on a cold, sharp glint. She stood still, staring at the empty road, her fingers clenching into fists. The house was silent, broken only by the ticking of the clock in the living room. Lana returned to the kitchen, but now her movements were different, quick, purposeful. She took an old phone out of a drawer, not the one that lay in plain sight, but another one hidden behind cans of cereal. She turned it on, checked her messages. The screen lit up with a short text. He left? Lana quickly typed a response. Yes, 3 weeks. She turned off her phone, put it back, and took a deep breath. Her gaze swept around the kitchen, the perfectly arranged spice jars, the gleaming dishes. This house was her stage, but it wasn't her only one. Lana knew how to play her part, but behind the scenes, there was another story in her life, one that Eric didn't even know about. She went upstairs to the bedroom and opened the closet. On the farthest shelf, behind boxes of winter clothes, was a small metal box. Lana pulled it out, set it on the bed, and opened it with the key she always wore on a chain under her dress. Inside was money neatly folded bundles, several fake passports, an old pistol, and a notebook with numbers written in her neat handwriting. She leafed through it, stopped at one page, and thought about it. "It's time," she said quietly to herself, and her voice was not at all like the one she had heard at breakfast. Lana spent the evening of the same day as usual. She watered the roses, weeded the beds, cooked dinner, a light salad, and baked fish, although she was going to eat alone. She turned on the TV to drown out the silence, but did not look at the screen. Her thoughts were somewhere far away, in places she never talked about. The doorbell rang. Lana didn't flinch or show surprise. She calmly stood up, adjusted her dress, and opened the door. A man stood on the threshold tall, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see right through everything. His dark jacket was slightly wrinkled, and he held a battered leather briefcase in his hands. "Layla," he said, his voice low and slightly mocking. "Or is it just Lana now?" "Go ahead, Jack," she said, stepping aside. Her tone was even, but there was steel in it. "And don't call me that. Layla is a thing of the past." He grinned, walked into the living room, and threw his briefcase on the sofa. "I don't think Layla's gone anywhere. She just learned how to make omelets and plant roses." He glanced around the room, his gaze lingering on the family photos on the mantel. "It's cozy. Eric's lucky." Lana crossed her arms, her gaze becoming colder. "What do you want, Jack?" "I made it clear that I'm done." He turned to face her, narrowing his eyes. "Quit? Seriously? You know people like us don't quit. You can wear a housewife's dress, but it doesn't change who you are." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I need your help, Leela. One last time." Lana was silent, her fingers trembled slightly, but she quickly clenched them into a fist. "I won't come back. I have another life. I have a husband, a house, a garden." "Yes, yes, the perfect picture," he interrupted, grinning. "But you don't think you can hide behind that facade forever, do you? They'll find you, sooner or later, and I can help you disappear, for real." She turned away, looking out the window where the evening light was bathing the garden in soft gold. Her heart was beating faster, but her face remained expressionless. "What are you suggesting?" she finally asked without turning around. Jack smiled, and there was something predatory in that smile. "There is a deal, a big one. 2 million at stake. Your share is half. But we need your special talent. No one will do it better than you." Lana turned slowly, her eyes meeting him. "And then what? I run again? A new city, a new name? I'm tired, Jack. I want peace." He shrugged as if her words meant nothing. "Peace is a luxury, Layla, and you know it better than I do." He took a folder from his briefcase and threw it on the table. "Think about it. You have 3 weeks while your husband builds his bridges. I'll be back." Lana didn't answer. She looked at the folder as if it were a poisonous snake. Jack headed for the door, but turned around on the threshold. "And you know, Lan," he paused, "you still dance like you did in the old days, even when you're just walking to the door." The door slammed behind him, and Lana was alone. She walked to the desk and opened the folder. Inside were photographs, drawings, names. Her fingers paused on one of the pages where her old name was written, Layla. She closed the folder, her breathing growing heavier. Night had fallen on the house, but Lana was awake. She sat in the living room, looking at a family photo of her and Eric laughing on the beach. Her smile in the picture was the same as it had been that morning, perfect, polished. But now, in the darkness, her eyes gleamed not with warmth, but with a cold, sharp light, like a predator who knows its prey is close. The next morning greeted Lana with a silence so thick that it seemed tangible, like fog. The house, which yesterday was full of familiar sounds, the clink of dishes, Eric's footsteps, his morning muttering, was now silent, as if holding its breath. Lana stood by the window in the living room, holding a cup of cold tea in her hands, and looked out at the garden. The roses she had planted so carefully swayed in the light breeze, but her thoughts were far from them. Another melody was already playing in her head, not the one that accompanied her ideal family life, but the one that awakened in her Leela, the woman who once ruled the stage and beyond. She set the cup on the windowsill and headed for the bedroom. Cleaning the house was her ritual, but not something the neighbors or Eric saw. It wasn't just order, it was preparation. Lana moved through the house with methodical precision, but her actions were filled with hidden meaning. She dusted the shelves, even though they were shiny, and straightened the pillows on the couch, even though they were perfect. Each gesture was part of a dance she was performing for herself, for the part of her that woke up when Eric left. Having finished the visible part of the cleaning, Lana went up to the bedroom and locked the door, although there was no one in the house. She opened the closet, took out the metal box that she had already held in her hands last night, and put it on the bed. The key on the chain hanging around her neck jingled softly as she opened the lock. Everything inside was in its place. Wads of money, neatly tied with rubber bands, 3 passports with different names, an old pistol that she had not touched for years, and a small box that she had pulled out first. It contained SIM cards, several bottles of perfume with sharp, spicy aromas, and a set of underwear black, silk, not at all like the cotton pajamas she wore for Eric. Lana took one of the SIM cards and inserted it into an old phone she had pulled out of a kitchen stash. The screen lit up, and she typed a short message. "Summer has begun." The answer came almost instantly. "I'm waiting." As always. She turned off her phone, put it back, and allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't the warmth she gave Eric, but something sharp, almost predatory. Summer for Lana wasn't about vacation or rest. Summer was her time, the time when she took off the mask of the model wife and became who she really was. Her summer vacation had begun 10 years ago, before Eric, when she realized that living in the shadows was her only way to survive. Back then, she was Leela, the star of the club, where men paid not only to dance, but also for her ability to listen, to manipulate, to keep them at her mercy. She learned to read people like books and exploit their weaknesses. But the club was just a front. Leela worked for people who didn't like to leave a trace, passing messages, gathering information, sometimes making deals that no one was supposed to notice. When she met Eric, she thought she could leave. He was kind, sincere, so ordinary. He saw her as Lana, the woman who cooked him breakfast and dreamed of a garden, and she almost believed that she could be her. Almost. But every summer, when Eric went away on his business trips, Leela returned. Not completely, not like before, but enough to remind herself of who she was. Her summer vacation was more than just an escape from routine. It was her freedom, her power, and the lovers she chose were part of that ritual. They didn't know the real her, they didn't know Leela, they didn't know about the box in the closet. To them, she was an enigma, a woman who appeared and disappeared, leaving behind only the scent of her perfume and the vague sense that they would never understand who she was. Christian was the first this year. He rang the doorbell in the late afternoon, just as the sun was setting, painting the sky crimson. Lana answered the door in a flowing black dress that showed off her figure without screaming past. Her hair was down, and her lips were tinted red, not too bright, but enough to remind her of Leela. "Do you always look like this when you open the door?" Christian smiled, leaning against the doorframe. He was tall, with a slight gray at the temples, and dressed in an expensive but slightly casual suit. His eyes slid over hers, and there was a familiar spark in them, a mixture of admiration and desire. "Only for those who arrive on time," Lana replied, stepping aside to let him in. Her voice was light, almost playful, but there was a confidence in it that made people obey. Christian walked in, looking around the living room. Cozy, I didn't think you were the type to fiddle with flowers and curtains. People change, she shrugged, pouring wine into 2 glasses. Or they pretend to change. Which do you prefer? He laughed as he accepted the glass. You always say that, as if I have to figure you out. Lana sat down on the sofa, crossing her legs, and looked at him with a slight smile. Don't you want to? Most men like riddles. I'm not most people. Christian took a sip of wine, not taking his eyes off her. But you're right. You're an enigma, and I don't know why I keep coming back. She leaned a little closer, her voice becoming quieter, almost intimate. Because you like the fact that you will never know the whole truth. They talked for a while longer about his work, about her garden, about insignificant details. Christian was a lawyer, one of those who could win cases that seemed hopeless. He was smart, charming, and confident enough not to ask too many questions. Lana had chosen him for a reason. He was useful, but not dangerous. He didn't know about her past, about Jack, about the box in the closet. To him, she was just Lana, the woman who appeared in his life once a year like summer rain and disappeared just as suddenly. As the night deepened, they retreated to the bedroom. Lana kept the lights on, only the moonlight pouring through the window, casting shadows on her skin. This was her territory, her rules. Christian was part of her ritual, but nothing more. When he left in the early morning, leaving a note on the table with a phone number she never used, Lana felt her body relax. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about passion. This was about control. The next day, she met another man, John. He was the complete opposite of Christian, young, impulsive, with tattoos that peeked out from under the sleeves of his shirt. He was an artist whose paintings sold for fabulous sums, but he acted as if he were still 20. They met not in a house, but in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, where no one knew Lana. She was sitting at a table by the window, wearing dark glasses and a light scarf that hid half her face. Are you always this mysterious? John plopped down in the chair opposite, his smile boyish, but his eyes hungry. I thought you were going to disappear again like last year. And you still expect me to stay? Lana leaned back in her chair, her voice soft but slightly mocking. I don't expect it. But I hope, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. You know you're not like everyone else. There's something dangerous about you. Lana laughed, but her laughter was empty, like the clinking of glasses. Dangerous? You read too many thrillers, John. Maybe, he shrugged, but his gaze never left her. But I'm right. You're not just a housewife, Lana. I can feel it. She didn't answer, just smiled and changed the subject. John was different. He was too curious, too emotional. That made him interesting, but also risky. She kept him at a distance, allowing him to see only what she wanted. Their meeting ended with a walk along the embankment, where he talked about his paintings and she listened, nodding at the right places. When he tried to take her hand, she gently pulled away, as if she hadn't noticed. John was part of her summer, but not part of her life. Each lover was like a note in a melody Lana played for herself. Christian was confident and stable. John was chaotic and energetic. There was a third, but she hadn't decided yet if she would meet him this year. Her summer vacation wasn't just about men, it was about reminding herself that she was still Leela, that she could still control, manipulate, hold strings in her hands that no one else could see. But this year was different. The file Jack had left behind sat at the bottom of the drawer, a dark spot on her perfect painting. She knew he would come back, and she knew his offer wasn't just a job. It was a challenge. And Lana, despite her best efforts to be different, felt Leela inside her awakening, ready to answer. She sat in the garden as the sun set, looking at the roses. Her phone, Eric's, was nearby, and she knew he would call soon to tell her how he had gotten there. She would answer, smile into the phone, say she missed him. But other words were already ringing in her head, the ones she would say when Jack returned. Summer had just begun, and Lana knew it would be hot. Lana sat in her garden, surrounded by roses that she had planted with such care as if they were her children. The morning light softly touched the petals, and their scent mingled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee in her hands. The house was immaculate. The floors gleamed, the dishes were in perfect order, and the curtains swayed gently in the morning breeze. But all of this, the house, the garden, the coffee, was just a set. The real Lana, or rather Leela, lived in a different rhythm, in a different world, one that she created every summer when Eric was away. It was her time, her stage, and she knew the rules of the game better than anyone. Her summer vacation was not just an escape from the routine of a housewife. It was a carefully constructed system where every step, every look, every word obeyed strict laws that she had established for herself. Lana was not looking for love, not looking for passion. She was looking for control. Power over herself, over others, over the situation. Her lovers Christian, John, and perhaps a third she had not yet chosen were not just men. They were her tools, her mirrors in which she saw a reflection of the Leela who once ruled nightclubs and shady deals. Lana had made her rules in the first year, when she realized she couldn't quite become the woman Eric wanted her to be. She loved him, or at least she convinced herself she did, but his love was too simple, too pure. It didn't satisfy her hunger. Leela, hidden behind Lana's mask, craved power, and her summer vacation was a way to satisfy that hunger without destroying the life she'd so carefully built. The first rule: one lover, one night. No repeat encounters for one summer. It wasn't about physical desire, but about a moment when she could be in complete control. Each night was a performance in which she was director, actress, and spectator all at once. She chose her men with the same precision with which she selected the seeds for her garden. They had to be interesting, but not too intrusive, successful, but not too domineering, attractive, but not so attractive that she would lose her own head. Christian, with his cool lawyer's mind, was perfect for conversations where she could play on his ego. John, with his youthful energy, made her feel like a predator keeping her prey on a short leash. A third, if he showed up this year, would have to be someone new, perhaps someone who would challenge her without breaking her control. The second rule: no gifts. Gifts created obligations, and Lana could not stand debt. She did not want flowers, jewelry, or even notes with promises. All she needed was a moment when a man looked at her with admiration mixed with a little fear, not understanding who she really was. She did not take anything except that look, that feeling that she was holding him in her arms. Third rule: no calls. She never used the same number twice. The SIM cards she kept in her drawer were changed every year. She bought them in different cities, in small shops where no one asked questions. Each number was for one summer, one man, one evening. Afterwards, she destroyed the SIM card as if she were destroying evidence. It wasn't just discretion, it was part of the ritual. Destroying the number meant she was free again, that no one could find her unless she wanted them to. The fourth rule, the most important: absolute control. Lana never let her emotions take over. She didn't fall in love, didn't get attached, didn't allow herself weakness. Her lovers might think they were close to her, that they understood her, but it was an illusion. She was a master of illusion. Every gesture, every word, every look was thought out. She knew how to make a man feel special, but at the same time keep him at a distance. She knew how to smile in a way that made him want to come back, but she never gave him a chance. Lana walked back into the house, put the cup in the sink, and went up to the bedroom. She opened a drawer, pulled out a box of perfume, and selected a bottle of a heavy, spicy scent, not the one she used on Eric, but the one that brought out the Leela in her. She applied a drop to her wrists, to the back of her neck, and inhaled. The scent was like a key, unlocking another part of her. She put on the black silk lingerie she kept separate from her everyday clothes and chose a dress navy blue, low cut, but not too revealing. Everything about her look was balanced, enough to draw attention, but not so much as to arouse suspicion. She went down to the living room and sat at the table where the notebook from her hiding place lay. Lana flipped through the pages, her fingers lingering on several names. She had already met Christian and John, but the third evening was still to come. She settled on a name: Stefan. He was new, not from her usual circle. A lighting designer who worked in theaters and concerts, a man who knew how to create atmosphere. Lana had chosen him for a reason. He was one of those who saw the world through the prism of art, but at the same time was pragmatic enough not to ask unnecessary questions. She typed a message. Today, 20 o'clock, Zvezda. Don't be late. The answer came within a minute. I will. Lana closed the book and put it back in the drawer. She knew Stefan would be part of her game, but only for one night. That was her rule, her law. She didn't want attachments. She didn't want complications. Her summer was about freedom, about reminding herself that she was still Leela, that she could still be in control. The Star was a small bar on the outskirts of town, with dim lights and jazz music blaring from an old record player. Lana had chosen the place for a reason. It was far enough from her house that none of the neighbors would see her, but close enough that she could return if something went wrong. She was sitting at the bar, slowly sipping a cocktail, when Stefan walked in. He was tall, with long fingers that seemed accustomed to manipulating delicate wires and light consoles. His hair was slightly tousled, and his eyes had that special light that people have when they love their work. Lana saw him glance around the room before his gaze settled on her. She smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile that made him quicken his pace. "Lana," he asked, sitting down next to her. His voice was deep, with a slight rasp, as if he had talked a lot or slept little. "That's it," Lana replied, tilting her head slightly. Her eyes studied him, but her face remained relaxed, almost playful. "You're Stefan, aren't you? The one who makes light come alive." He laughed, and there was something sincere in his laughter that made Lana think for a moment. But she pushed the thought away. Sincerity was dangerous. Sincerity broke the rules. "You could say that," he replied, ordering a whiskey. "But I like to think of myself as telling stories, with light, shadows, color. And you? What do you do, Lana?" She paused, sipping her drink. The question was always a test, not for her, but for the person asking it. She could tell the truth, she could lie, she could say something in between. But the truth was too complicated, and the lie was too boring. "I create coziness," she said finally, her voice soft but slightly mocking. "A house, a garden, all that. But, that's also a kind of art." Stefan nodded, his gaze becoming more attentive. "Comfort, then? But for some reason, it seems to me that this is not the whole story." Lana smiled wider, but her eyes remained cold. "You like to look for hidden meanings, right? Is it because of your job?" "Maybe," he shrugged, but didn't look away. "Or just because you're intriguing." They talked for another hour, about theater, about music, about how lighting could change the mood of a stage. Lana listened, nodded, asked questions, but her thoughts were on the edge. She was assessing him as she would a chess piece. Stefan was smart, but not too pushy. He was charmed, but not over the edge. He was perfect for her game. When they left the bar, the night was warm, with a faint smell of the river wafting down from the waterfront. Lana suggested they take a walk, and Stefan agreed. They walked along the water, and he talked about his latest project, a light show for a rock concert. Lana listened, but her attention was elsewhere, on the way he looked at her, the way he responded to her words, the way he tried to guess who she was. It was her power to keep him guessing, to give him just enough to make him want more. "You're not like the others," he said suddenly, stopping. His voice was quieter than before, and there was a genuine attempt to understand. "I don't know what it is, but it's like you play by your own rules." Lana stopped and turned to him. Her smile was soft, but there was a cold glint in her eyes. "Maybe you're right," she said, stepping closer. "But you know what's most interesting about games? The rules are made by the one who plays the best." She leaned down, her lips brushing his cheek, and she felt his breath catch in his throat. This was her moment, the moment she knew she had him. They reached her car, parked in the shadows, and Lana turned to him. "It was a good evening, Stefan," she said, her voice warm but final. "But rules are rules. Good night." He wanted to say something, but she had already gotten into the car, closed the door, and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, She saw him standing there, watching her go, his face a mixture of admiration and confusion. Lana smiled to herself. Another note in her melody, another night where she was queen. Back home, Lana kicked off her shoes and went into the bedroom. She opened the drawer, pulled out the SIM card she had used for Stefan, and snapped it in half. It was a ritual erasing traces, erasing connections. She didn't want anyone to find her unless she allowed it. But then her eyes fell on the folder Jack had left behind. It sat in the drawer, a reminder that her control wasn't absolute. Lana sat down on the bed, opened the folder, and began to read. The names, the addresses, the plans, it was all familiar. This was her old world, Leela's world, where she had been more than just a dancer, a go-between, a courier, a shadow. Jack had offered to bring her back, but not just for the money. He knew she couldn't resist the challenge. He knew Leela was still alive. She closed the folder and lay down on the bed, looking at the ceiling. Her heart was beating steadily, but Jack's words were ringing in her head. People like us don't quit. She hated him for saying that, but she hated herself even more for being right. Her summer vacation was her way of keeping Leela under control, channeling her energy into safe channels. But what if that wasn't enough anymore? What if Jack's folder wasn't a threat, but an opportunity? Lana closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. She thought about Eric, about the call he would make tomorrow morning, his voice full of warmth and trust. She thought about Stefan, about Christian, about John, the men who were part of her game, but who had never seen the real her. And she thought about Jack, about his offer, about the world she was trying to leave behind. Summer was in full swing, and Lana knew her game was just beginning. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever, and the rules she had so carefully crafted were in jeopardy. Summer in the suburbs flowed slowly, like honey dripping from a spoon. The days were filled with heat, the scent of flowers, and the soft hum of insects circling Lana's garden. She sat on the porch, leafing through a book she wasn't reading, her mind wandering far from the pages. 3 evenings of her summer vacation had already passed. Christian with his cool confidence, John with his youthful ardor, Stefan with his artistic soul. Each had been part of her ritual, her carefully constructed game in which she was the only player who knew all the rules. But tonight was the 4th evening, and Lana felt a slight tension she couldn't explain. A new man, a new challenge, a new note in her melody. And yet, something told her that this evening would be different. She had chosen him a week ago, leafing through her address book. His name was Daniel, and he was a photographer, not the kind who shot weddings or corporate events, but the kind who looked for stories in shadows, in reflections, in fleeting glances. She had found him through mutual friends, through careful questions and casual mentions. Daniel was charismatic, but not flashy. His charm was in the way he looked at the world, as if he saw more than others. It intrigued Lana, but it also made her wary. She was used to men who were predictable in their unpredictability, but Daniel seemed different. And today, she was going to find out how much. Lana stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting her dress, a dark green dress with soft folds that flattered her figure without being too obvious. Her hair was pulled back into a loose bun, a few strands falling down her neck, creating the illusion of casualness. She applied perfume, the same spicy scent that always brought out the Leela in her. Tonight, she'd chosen a venue away from the city, a small restaurant on the shore of a lake, with tables right on the water's edge and lanterns reflecting off the dark surface. This was her space, private enough to feel safe, but open enough to be in control. She sent a message from another disposable SIM card, 21 o'clock, Ozerny, table by the water. The answer came within a minute, already on the way. Lana smiled, but it wasn't the smile she'd given Eric. It was Leela's smile, sharp, almost predatory. She picked up her purse, checked the contents, keys, wallet, another SIM card just in case, and walked out of the house, leaving silence behind her. The Ozerny restaurant was full of soft light and quiet conversations. Lana sat at a table by the water, her fingers lightly tapping her glass of white wine. She always arrived first, another rule of her game. It gave her a chance to study the space, to assess the decor, to feel like the mistress of the stage. She noticed Daniel as soon as he walked in. He was tall, with a slight stoop that betrayed a man accustomed to sitting for long periods of time in front of a camera or a computer. His dark hair was a little longer than necessary, and there was something in his eyes, dark brown, almost black, that made Lana wary. He wasn't just looking. He was observing. "Lana?" he asked, approaching the table. His voice was low, with a slight rasp, as if he was used to speaking quietly so as not to frighten the moment. He smiled, and there was something disarming about his smile, but not feigned. "Daniel," she replied, bowing her head slightly. "I'm glad you're not late." "I'm never late." He sat down opposite her, his gaze sliding over her, but not lingering too long. It was unusual. Most men couldn't take their eyes off her, but Daniel looked at her as if he had already taken a photo and was now analyzing it in his head. "A beautiful place. Your choice?" "Yes." Lana sipped her wine, not taking her eyes off him. "I like water. It's calming. And you? What do you like, Daniel?" He chuckled, leaning back in his chair. His fingers ran along the edge of the menu, but he didn't even open it. "I love moments. When everything comes together, light, shadow, emotion. When you look through the lens and realize you've captured something real." He paused, looking at her. "And you, Lana? What are you capturing?" She felt her pulse quicken slightly. The question was simple, but there was something in his tone that made her wary. He wasn't just chatting, he was probing. "I'm catching harmony," she replied, her voice soft but slightly mocking. "A house, a garden, good wine. Simple things." Daniel narrowed his eyes, his smile grew wider, but there was no warmth in it. "Simple things? I don't believe it. You don't seem like the type to settle for simple things." Lana laughed, loudly, almost sincerely, but her eyes remained attentive. "You draw conclusions without even knowing me. Is it because of your work? Do photographers always look for hidden meanings?" "Maybe," he shrugged, but his gaze didn't leave hers. "Or just because you stand out. There's something about you that doesn't fit in with this restaurant, this evening. Like you're playing a role." Lana froze for a split second, but then pulled herself together. She leaned a little closer. Her voice became quieter, almost intimate. "And you, Daniel, what role do you play?" He didn't answer right away, his fingers tapping on the table as if picking up a rhythm. "Me, I'm just a guy with a camera who likes to ask questions. But you know what I've noticed? People who play roles usually don't like being asked too much." She smiled, but her smile was sharp as a blade. "And you like asking questions, right? Is that your way of seizing moments?" "Maybe." He leaned closer, his voice quieter. "But I also know when to stop. You like things your way, don't you?" Lana felt her control slip, not much, but enough that she noticed. Daniel was different. Christian was predictable in his confidence, John in his impulsiveness, Stefan in his romanticism. But Daniel was different. He had seen too much, and that made him dangerous, but also intriguing. "Everyone has their own rules," she said finally, leaning back in her chair. "The question is whether you're willing to accept them." He looked at her, and something flashed in his eyes, not admiration, not desire, but something deeper, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. "Name your rules, Lana," he said, his voice calm but steely. "I like games as long as they're fair." She paused, assessing him. He was charismatic without being overbearing. He asked questions without being overbearing. He was the perfect candidate for her game and a threat at the same time. Lana decided to play along, but on her terms. "One rule," she said, her voice soft but firm. "One night, nothing more. No calls, no promises. Agreed?" Daniel looked at her for a few seconds, his face unreadable. Then he nodded, slowly, as if weighing each word. "Agreed. But I have a rule too. I want to know who you are. Not the whole truth, don't be afraid, but at least something real." Lana felt her heart skip a beat. This was against her rules. She never gave anything real. But there was something in his gaze that made her pause. Not weakness, not a desire to please, but a challenge. He knew she was playing, and he wanted to play her on equal terms. "Okay," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper, "but just for one evening, and you don't ask too many questions." "Agreed," he smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Lana feel like not only a player, but also a piece on the board. They talked for hours, moving from lighter topics to more personal ones, but Lana always kept her distance. She told him about her garden, how she loved to tinker with roses, but she didn't mention that every rose in her garden was planted with control in mind, how she could force even nature to obey. Daniel told her about his travels, about how he photographed sunsets in the desert and the faces of people in small villages, but Lana noticed that he, too, was holding something back. He was cautious, like her, and it made their conversation like a dance, every step measured, every look considered. "You know what I noticed?" he said as they walked along the lake, leaving the restaurant behind. "You never talk about the past. Not a word. It's like you came out of nowhere." Lana stopped, her shoes creaking slightly on the gravel. She turned to him, her face calm, but a cold glint in her eyes. "And you," she replied, her voice light, but with a hint of mockery. "You talk about your photographs, but not a word about why you take them. What are you hiding, Daniel?" He laughed, but his laughter was not as light as before. "Okay, you're right. Everyone has their secrets. But I still want to know one thing. Why did you choose me?" Lana looked at him, her lips curling slightly. "Because you see more than others, and I wonder how far you can go." He stepped closer, and for a second Lana felt her control waver. His gaze was too penetrating, too close to seeing Leela behind Lana's mask. "What if I see too much?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. She didn't back down. Her smile became sharper. "Then you will lose, Daniel, because my rules are unbreakable." He didn't answer, but his gaze said more than his words. They stood by the water, the moonlight reflecting off the lake, casting shadows on their faces. Lana knew that this would be Daniel's last night in her game. He was too observant, too close to breaking her control. But at the same time, she felt that he was more than just another note in her melody. He was a discord that could change the whole music. When Lana got home, the night was deep and silent. She kicked off her shoes, went into the bedroom, and opened her drawer. The SIM card she had used for Daniel had gone into the trash, broken like all the others. But this time, she didn't feel the usual satisfaction. Daniel had left something in her, not a mark, not affection, but a question. He had seen her, or at least he had tried to, and that was dangerous. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Jack's file sat in the drawer, a dark spot on her perfect picture. Daniel, with his questions, was another spot. Lana closed her eyes, but sleep would not come. Her summer was in full swing, but for the first time in years, she felt like her rules might be challenged, and it scared her as much as it excited her. Night by the lake was still in the air when Daniel returned to his apartment on the outskirts of town. The streetlights reflected in the dark windows, and the silence of the small studio, littered with camera equipment and old films, seemed deafening after his conversation with Lana. He threw his keys on the table where his lenses, laptop, and tattered notebook lay and sank heavily into a chair. His fingers automatically reached for a pack of cigarettes, but he stopped, looking at the dark screen of his phone. Lana. Her image still burned in his memory, not just her face, her movements, her voice, but something elusive, like a shadow that he had noticed but could not catch. Daniel wasn't just a photographer, as he had introduced himself to her. That was only part of the truth, a facade he used to avoid scaring her off. In reality, he was a private detective, one of those who could find answers where others saw only questions. He had been hired by Eric, Lana's husband, 2 weeks ago. The task was simple, to gather evidence of her infidelity. Eric, with his tired voice and genuine concern, spoke of how he loved his wife, but felt that something was wrong. "She's perfect," he had said then, sitting in a cafe across from Daniel. "But sometimes, I don't know how to explain it. It's like she's not here, not with me." Daniel took on the case as he would any other. He was used to such stories, suspicions, betrayals, secrets hidden behind closed doors of suburban homes. He expected to see a bored housewife looking for adventure while her husband was away on a business trip. But Lana was different. She was not just a woman who cheated. She was a mystery, a puzzle that he could not solve, and this awakened in him something more than just professional interest. Daniel turned on his laptop, and the screen lit up with a folder labeled Lana. Inside were photographs, not the ones he showed clients, but ones he'd taken for himself. Lana in the garden, watering roses, her figure in a flowing dress, illuminated by the morning sun. Lana in a cafe with John, her smile seeming both sincere and distant. Lana by the lake today, when her eyes caught his, and he felt something inside him shift. He shouldn't have taken these pictures. It was against his own rules not to get involved, not to get attached. But Lana wasn't just an object to be observed. She was art. He opened the notebook where he kept notes on the case. His handwriting was small, almost illegible, as if he was trying to hide his thoughts even from himself. Lana, 32. Married to Eric K., an engineer. No children. Lives in a suburban colonial revival home. Maintains garden, keeps house meticulously tidy. Dates men, Christian, lawyer, 38. John, artist, 27. Stefan, lighting designer, 34. All one-night stands, no trace afterwards. Uses disposable SIM cards. None of the men know her real name or address. He paused, tapping his pen on the page. The last line had been added today, after their conversation by the lake. He knows he's playing, but he doesn't know that I know. He closed the book and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Lana wasn't just an unfaithful wife. She was a master of control, and that fascinated him. He saw how she manipulated him with every gesture, every word, but unlike the others, he noticed. And instead of just collecting evidence and handing it to Eric, he wanted to understand her. Not just as a detective, but as someone who saw her as more than just an object. Daniel took out his phone and opened the message that Lana had sent him before the meeting. 21 o'clock, Ozerny. Table by the water. He reread it, as if hoping to find something in the words he had missed. She was cautious, like a predator who knows he may be watched. But she didn't know that he was more than just another man in her game. He was the hunter and the hunted because Lana, without knowing it, had already captured his thoughts. He remembered their conversation in the restaurant, her voice, soft but with sharp edges, her gaze, which simultaneously attracted and repelled. "You like asking questions, don't you?" she said then, leaning a little closer so that her scent spicy, with notes of sandalwood enveloped him. "Is this your way of capturing moments?" He answered something light, evasive, but inside he felt she was testing him, as if she were seeing how far he would go. And he went further than he should have. He asked about her rules, about why she had chosen him, and her answer was, "Because you see more than others," stuck in his head like a splinter. She was right. He had seen. But what he had seen did not fit within the framework of his assignment. Daniel pulled out of his desk drawer the folder of photographs he had taken for Eric. They were of Lana with other men, shots taken from afar, with a telephoto lens. They were evidence he had to give to his client. But he couldn't bring himself to send them. Not because he felt sorry for Lana, he wasn't sentimental, but because he felt these pictures were only part of the story, and he wanted to know the whole truth. The next morning, Daniel was sitting in a cafe, the same one where he'd met Eric 2 weeks ago. He ordered a black coffee and flipped through his notes, but his mind was on Lana. He remembered how she'd looked at him by the lake, how her lips had brushed his cheek as she'd said goodbye. It hadn't been just a gesture, it had been part of her game, her way of reminding him that she was in control. But Daniel wasn't one to give in easily. His phone vibrated, and he glanced at the screen. A message from Eric. "Any news? I'll be in town in a week. I want to know what's going on." Daniel put the phone down without answering. He knew he should send the photos, file a report, and close the case. But instead he thought about Lana, about her smile, which was both a mask and a weapon, about her eyes, in which a shadow flickered not fear, not weakness, but something much deeper. He opened his laptop and started searching. Not Lana, he already knew everything he could find about her in the public domain. He was looking for Layla. The name had come up in a conversation with one of his contacts, a man who had known her in the past. Layla was a dancer, a nightclub star, a woman who could make men feel like kings until they realized they were pawns. But Layla had disappeared years ago, and no one knew where she had gone. Daniel suspected that Lana and Layla were the same person, but he had no proof. Yet, he remembered how she talked about her rules. One evening. Nothing more. No calls, no promises. This wasn't just a whim. It was a system, built with the same precision with which she tended her garden. And Daniel wanted to understand why. Not for Eric, not for the cause, but for himself. Lana wasn't just an object of observation. She was a mystery he wanted to solve, even if it meant breaking his own rules. That evening, Daniel sat in his car, parked a few blocks from Lana's house. He wasn't following her, not today. He just sat there, looking at her house, lit by the soft glow of the streetlights. He knew she was home. The light was on in the living room, and he'd seen her silhouette flicker in the window. She moved with the same grace she always did, but now he looked at her not as a detective, but as a man who felt himself being drawn into a game he wasn't sure who would win. He pulled out his camera and took a picture, not for the case, but for himself. Lana in the window, her shadow on the curtain, as if she were part of some other world. He knew he wouldn't send this picture to Eric. He knew he wouldn't close this case until he figured out who she really was. And he knew it wasn't just a professional interest. Lana, or Leela, or whoever she was, captivated him. Not as a woman, not as a lover, but as an object of study, an enigma that promised to be dangerous, but from which he could not tear himself away. Daniel started the engine and drove away, leaving Lana's house behind. But her image, her smile, her gaze, her shadow stayed with him. He knew he would come back, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Summer in the suburbs flowed on as usual, but for Lana, every day was like a taut string, ready to snap at any moment. Her summer vacation continued, and she played her role with the usual precision, the perfect housewife by day, the queen of her game by night. But after meeting Daniel, something had changed. His questions, his gaze, his strange ability to see more than she was letting on, left her with a slight uneasiness, like a splinter under her skin. She was used to being the only player who knew the rules, but now she felt that someone else might know them just as well. The morning began with a familiar ritual. Lana stood at the stove, preparing a breakfast that no one would eat, simply because that was what a model wife did. She sliced apples for oatmeal, carefully laid them out on a plate, and added a pinch of cinnamon. Her movements were smooth, almost meditative, but her thoughts were somewhere else. She thought about Daniel, about the way he looked at her by the lake, as if he were trying to take her apart like a puzzle. It wasn't just curiosity, it was a threat. The phone on the table vibrated, and Lana glanced at the screen. Eric. She smiled that warm, soft smile she'd been honing for years and answered. Hello, darling. Her voice was like honey, warm and enveloping. How are your bridges? Lan, you have no idea how hot it is here. Eric's voice was tired, but there was joy in her voice. The bridge is standing, but I'm already dreaming of your garden and cold lemonade. How are you? Lana laughed, adjusting a curl of hair, even though he couldn't see her. Everything is as usual. The roses are blooming, the house is shining, and I miss you. The neighbors are complaining about Tolik's lawn mower again, but I'm holding my ground. My protector, Eric chuckled, and she could almost hear him smiling. Listen, I was thinking, maybe when I get back, we could go somewhere, just you and me. No bridges, no neighbors. Lana felt a slight twinge in her chest. His sincerity always made her feel a little guilty, but she quickly pushed the feeling away. That sounds tempting, she replied, her voice not wavering. But you know I can't leave my roses. They'll be lost without me. I know, he sighed, but there was no offense in his tone. Okay, I'll call tomorrow. Love you, Lan. And I love you, she said, her voice as warm as the sunlight pouring into the kitchen. But as soon as the call ended, her smile disappeared. She looked at the phone as if it were a stranger and set it down on the table. Eric was part of her life, but not her game, and the game was getting harder. Lana went out into the garden to distract herself. She picked up the pruning shears and began trimming the roses, but her thoughts were on Daniel. He had agreed to her rules one night, no calls, no promises, but something about him was bothering her. He was too attentive, too aware. She was used to men who saw in her what she wanted to show. Mysterious but accessible, desirable but unattainable. Daniel looked at her as if he saw not Lana, but Layla, the one she hid behind smiles and carefully constructed phrases. She returned to the house and opened her hiding place. The notebook was lying next to the wads of cash and the bottles of perfume. Lana leafed through it, stopping at the page with Daniel's name. She had written it down as Daniel, photographer, 35. But now she added another line, too observant. It wasn't just a description. It was a note to herself, a warning. She took out a new SIM card, inserted it into the phone, and typed a message. Today, 22 o'clock, shadow. Don't be late. She chose another bar, away from the lake, in the center of town, where the crowd and noise could be her allies. If Daniel was a threat, she wanted to meet him on her turf, where she could control his every move. The answer came quickly, I will. But you know, I don't like being late. Lana looked at the message, her lips quivering slightly. He was playing by her rules, but there was a hint of mockery in his words, as if he knew more than he was letting on. She broke the SIM card and threw it in the trash. It was her ritual, her way of erasing traces. But this time, she felt like someone else was leaving traces too, and they were leading to her. The shadow bar was crowded, and the air smelled of cigarettes, whiskey, and expensive perfume. Lana sat in the corner, at a table she'd chosen for its privacy. Her dress black, with a high slit, was her armor, her way of making a statement without saying a word. She sipped her martini, her eyes darting over the crowd, but she already knew that Daniel would come. He wouldn't be late. He showed up at 10 p.m. sharp, his dark frame silhouetted against the neon lights of the bar. He was wearing a dark shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. His gaze found hers instantly, and Lana felt her pulse quicken slightly. She wasn't used to this feeling, the slight, almost imperceptible tension that came with his presence. Lana, he said, sitting down across from her. His voice was calm, but there was an energy to it, as if he were holding himself back. New place, new game. She smiled, her fingers wrapping around the glass. You think too much about games, Daniel. Maybe this is just a bar. Maybe, he leaned closer, his eyes catching hers. But you're not the type to pick things just like that. This bar, this table, this dress, it's all part of your plan, right? Lana laughed, but her laugh was a little sharper than usual. You see plans where there are none. I just wanted a drink. What about you? He ordered whiskey without taking his eyes off her. I wanted to see you, again, even though you made it clear that one evening was all I was getting. And yet you're here, she bowed her head, her voice becoming quieter. Why? Daniel paused, his fingers running along the rim of his glass. Because you're interesting, not like the others. You're like a photograph I can't make out. Too many shadows. Lana felt her control waver. He was too close to the truth, too close to seeing Leela. She decided to change tactics. And you, Daniel? She asked, her voice softer, almost seductive. Who are you? A photographer looking for the perfect shot? Or something more? He smiled, but his smile was not as open as before. I'm just a person who likes to ask questions. But you're right. Everyone has shadows, even me. They talked for a while, throwing phrases that were both light and heavy. Lana felt like he was playing with her, just as she was playing with him. This wasn't just a conversation, it was a duel, each trying to find the other's weak spot. She noticed how he left the napkin with his phone number on the table, as if by accident. She noticed how his gaze lingered on her hands, on the way she held her glass. And she noticed the small notebook he took out to write something down, too small to be a photographer, too tattered to be a casual notebook. "What are you writing down?" she asked, her voice light, but with a hint of steel in it. He looked at her, his eyes calm but attentive. "Ideas. For pictures. Sometimes they come to mind at the most inopportune moment. Like now." She leaned closer, her smile sharp. "What do you see, Daniel? What kind of picture do you want to take?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze slid over her face, as if he was really trying to capture her. "You," he said finally, "but not the way you want to appear, but the way you are." Lana felt her heart skip a beat. It wasn't just a compliment. It was a challenge. She stood up, her movements fluid but determined. "Come on," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "It's too noisy here." They walked out of the bar, and the night was cool. Lana led him to her car, parked in a dark alley. She knew it was a risk, but she also knew she had to find out who he was. She stopped at the car, turned to face him. "Last chance, Daniel," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Tell me one truth. Who are you?" He looked at her, and something flashed in his eyes, not fear, not weakness, but something she couldn't read. "I am a man who sees more than you think," he said, stepping closer. "And you, Lana, who are you?" She didn't answer. Her lips brushed his, but it wasn't a kiss, it was a test. She wanted to feel his reaction, to understand how serious he was, and she felt it. His breathing became deeper, but his hands remained motionless. He didn't give in. Lana stepped back, her smile cold. "Good night, Daniel. Rules are rules." She got into her car and drove away, leaving him in the alley. But in the rearview mirror, she saw him take out that same notebook and write something down. And in that moment, she realized Daniel was not just guest number 4. He was a player, and his game was no less dangerous than her own. Back home, Lana opened her hiding place. She pulled out her notebook and added another line under Daniel's name, "Not who he says he is." She knew she had to be careful. She knew he was leaving traces: the napkin, the notebook, his questions. And she knew her control, her rules, her game were now at risk. Later that night, the phone rang again. "Eric." "Lan, did I wake you up?" His voice was soft, full of concern. "No, darling," she replied, her voice as warm as ever. "How are you?" "Tired, but everything is fine. The bridge is almost ready. And you, what's new?" "Nothing special," she lied, her eyes sliding to the drawer where Jack's folder was. "I just miss you." But when she hung up, her smile disappeared. She sat in the dark, looking at her reflection in the window. Two mirrors, Lana and Leela, staring at each other, and somewhere between them was Daniel, the man who had seen too much. The game had begun, and Lana knew she had to win, at any cost. The summer in the suburbs had grown hotter, and the air seemed to shimmer with heat, as if the world itself were on edge. Lana sat on the veranda of her house, her fingers idly twirling the petals of the rose she had just cut. She loved these moments of solitude, when she could be herself, not Lana, not Leela, but something in between, somewhere between the mask and the truth. Her summer vacation had gone according to plan, but the shadow of Daniel, the fourth guest, still hung over her like a cloud that would not dissipate even on the clearest day. His questions, his glances, his strange ability to see her without allowing her to be in complete control of the situation, left her with a feeling she was not accustomed to: uncertainty. She had already destroyed the SIM card she had used for their last meeting, smashing it with practiced precision, but something told her that Daniel wouldn't disappear as easily as the others. He had left traces: a napkin with a number on it, a look that was too penetrating, a notebook he'd pulled out of an alley. Lana was used to being the only player who knew the rules, but now she felt like someone else was pulling the strings, and it both angered and excited her. The morning began with the usual routine. Lana made coffee, her movements smooth, almost automatic. She chopped fruit for a salad, even though she knew she wouldn't eat it. It was her way of maintaining the illusion for herself, for the neighbors, for Eric, who could call at any moment. The phone was on the table, and, as if on cue, it rang. She glanced at the screen. Eric. "Hello, love." Her voice was warm, like the sunlight pouring into the kitchen. She had practiced that tone to perfection, and it never failed. Lan, good morning. Eric's voice was slightly hoarse, as if he had just woken up. I'm almost drowning in paperwork here. This bridge is the end of me. How are you? Lana smiled, though he couldn't see her. She picked up a cup of coffee and walked out onto the veranda, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. Everything is as usual, she answered, her voice light, almost playful. I watered the roses, cleaned the house. The neighbor's dog tried to dig under the fence again, but I restrained him. Eric laughed, and there was so much sincerity in his laughter that Lana felt a twinge of guilt for a second. But she quickly pushed the feeling away. You're my heroine, he said. Listen, I was thinking, maybe when I get back we can have a picnic. Just you, me, and your famous sandwiches. It sounds tempting, she replied, her voice not wavering. But you know I can't leave the garden. It will wither without me. I know, he sighed, but there was only warmth in his tone. Okay, I'll call tomorrow. Love you, Lan. And I you, she said, her voice as soft as the rose petals she held in her hand. She hung up and looked out at the garden. Her smile was gone, replaced by a cold glint in her eyes. Eric was her anchor, but Daniel was her challenge. By midday, Lana had decided to do some cleaning, even though the house was already sparkling clean. It was her way of calming her nerves, of regaining control. She wiped down the shelves, straightened out the books that no one had read, and checked that everything was in its place in her secret place. The metal box in the closet was her sanctuary, the place where Leela lived without masks. She opened it, checked the SIM cards, the money, and the passports. Jack's file lay at the bottom, a reminder that her past was still breathing down her neck. She closed the box and took a deep breath. Her game was under control, or so she thought. The doorbell rang, making her jump, a rare feeling for Lana, who was always prepared for the unexpected. She looked at her watch. Noon. No one came to her without warning. The neighbors knew she preferred privacy, and the couriers always called in advance. Lana approached the door, her movements cautious but confident. She looked through the peephole and froze. Daniel. He was standing on the porch, wearing a dark shirt and jeans, his hair slightly disheveled, and holding a small box tied with a ribbon. His face was calm, but there was a familiar spark in his eyes, the same one that made Lana feel like she was being targeted. She opened the door. Her smile was polite but cold. Daniel, she said, her voice even but with a hint of steel in it. I wasn't expecting guests. I know, he smiled, but his smile wasn't as open as it had been at the bar. But I thought I'd break your rules. Just once. Lana crossed her arms, her gaze sharpening. My rules are not meant to be broken. What are you doing here? He held up the box as if that was an explanation. I brought something. For your garden. Seeds. Lana raised an eyebrow, her voice growing even colder. You brought me seeds without an invitation. Not just seeds, he stepped closer, his tone light, almost playful. A rare variety. For your roses, I thought you'd appreciate it. Lana felt her heart beat faster. This wasn't just a gift. It was a challenge. She hated gifts, they created obligations, they violated her control. But she hated even more that he had shown up unannounced, on her property, in her home. It was a disruption to her ritual, and she felt her anger mingle with something else, an arousal she didn't want to acknowledge. Come in, she said finally, stepping aside. Her voice was calm, but inside she was seething. He was playing her, and she couldn't let him win. They walked into the living room, and Lana motioned him to the couch, but remained standing, keeping her distance. She didn't offer him coffee or wine that would have been too welcoming, too weak a stance. Instead, she crossed her arms and looked at him, her eyes cool but attentive. So, she began, her voice a blade, sharp and precise. You decided you could just come over to my house? That's not the rules, Daniel. He laughed, and his laugh was as disarming as his look. I know your rules, Lana, but sometimes the rules have to be broken. Otherwise, the game gets boring. She felt her cheeks flush slightly, not from embarrassment, but from anger. He was being brash, and that was new. None of her lovers had ever dared to behave like that. Christian was too predictable, John was too impulsive, Stefan was too romantic. But Daniel, he was like a mirror that reflected her own game, and it scared her as much as it excited her. "You think this is a game?" she asked, her voice quieter but still menacing. "Then you should know that I'm not losing." "Oh, I believe you." He leaned forward, his eyes catching hers. "But you know, Lana, I don't like losing either, and I think you've noticed that." She didn't answer, her fingers curling into fists. He was too close to breaking her control. She pointed to the box still on the table. "What is it?" she asked, her tone sharp, as if she wanted to bring the conversation back to her territory. "Open it," he said, his voice calm but slightly mocking. "It's not a gift, if that's what you're thinking. Just a gesture." Lana opened the box, her movements cautious, as if she expected to find something dangerous. "Inside were packets of seeds, a rare variety of rose," he said. But next to it was a small card that read, "For a garden you like to control." Lana felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't just a gesture, it was a provocation. "You think you know me," she said, her voice cold but trembling. "But you're wrong." "Maybe," he shrugged, but his gaze was too keen. "Or maybe I see more than you think." Lana was about to answer, but her phone rang again. Eric. She looked at Daniel, her eyes narrowed. "Don't move," she said, her voice like steel. She walked to the window, answering the call. "Lan, are you busy?" Eric's voice was warm but tired. "I just wanted to hear from you." "No, I'm fine," she replied, her voice instantly softening, as if she were wearing a mask. "How are you? Has the bridge collapsed yet?" He laughed, and the sound was so familiar, so safe, that Lana felt guilty for a second. "It's holding up for now, but I miss you. How's your garden?" "It's blooming," she replied, her gaze sliding to Daniel, who was sitting on the couch, leafing through her gardening magazine as if he were at home. "Everything's under control." "This is my Lana," Eric said, and there was pride in his voice. "I'll call you tomorrow, okay? I love you." "And I love you," she replied, her voice perfect as always. She hung up and turned to Daniel, her eyes cold. "It's cozy here," he said, not looking up from his magazine. "But you know, I noticed one thing. You have everything under control, but sometimes it seems like you're afraid of losing him." Lana stepped closer, her movements smooth but threatening. "You talk too much, Daniel," she said, her voice low, almost threatening. "And you see too much." "Maybe," he closed the magazine and looked at her. "But I like what I see." She felt her control slip, not much, but enough that she noticed. It was a new feeling, a mixture of anger and arousal that she couldn't ignore. He was tugging at her strings, and it was the first time in years. She wanted to kick him out, put him in his place, but instead she sat across from him, her gaze like a blade. "You're breaking my rules," she said, her voice calm but stormy. "It's dangerous." "I know," he replied, his smile almost predatory. "But isn't that the point of the game?" Lana didn't answer. She felt her heart beating faster, her control cracking at the seams. Daniel wasn't just guest number 4. He was the one who could ruin her game or make it more interesting, and that scared her as much as it excited her. The suburban summer had grown stifling, as if the air had thickened with the anticipation of a storm. Lana sat in her bedroom, surrounded by silence broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. Her fingers clutched the metal box she had pulled from its hiding place in the closet. It was her ritual to make sure everything was in place, under control. But today her hands were shaking, and she couldn't ignore the feeling. Daniel, the 4th guest, had left a crack in her world, and she knew she had to find its source before everything fell apart. Her summer vacation had always been her territory, her game, where she set the rules and never lost. But Daniel was different. His unexpected visit to her home, his words, his look, all of it was like small stones thrown into the calm water of her life, creating ripples that she could not stop. She felt that he was not who he claimed to be, and this feeling, a mixture of anger and excitement, did not give her peace. The morning began with the usual routine. Lana was preparing breakfast, although she knew she would be eating alone. She sliced toast, put fresh berries on a plate, and brewed tea with mint. Everything was perfect, like a picture, but her thoughts were somewhere far away. She thought about Daniel, about his box of seeds, about his words. For a garden you like to control. It wasn't just a provocation. It was a hint that he knew more than he was saying. The phone on the table rang, and Lana glanced at the screen. Eric. She answered, her voice warm as always, but her eyes remained cold. Hello, darling, she said, adjusting a curl of hair, although he couldn't see her. How are your bridges? Lan, you have no idea how tired I am. Eric's voice was soft, but there was a sense of melancholy in it. This project will finish me off, but I think about you all the time. How are you? Lana stepped out onto the veranda, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. She looked out at the garden, where the roses swayed in the morning breeze. Everything is as usual, she answered, her voice light, almost playful. I watered the flowers, cleaned the house. The neighbor's cat climbed into my garden again, but I chased him away. Eric laughed, and the sound was so familiar, so safe, that Lana felt guilty for a second. But she quickly pushed the feeling away. You're my protector, he said, and there was pride in his voice. Listen, I was thinking. When I get back, maybe we could spend a weekend somewhere by the sea. Just you and me. That sounds tempting, she replied, her voice not wavering. But you know I can't leave my roses. They'll be lost without me. I know, he sighed, but there was only warmth in his tone. Okay, I'll call tomorrow. Love you, Lan. And I love you, she said, her voice perfect as always. She hung up and looked out at the garden. Her smile was gone, replaced by a cold glint in her eyes. Eric was her anchor, but Daniel was a threat, and she had to deal with him. After the call, Lana returned to the bedroom and opened her hiding place. She took out her notebook and flipped through it to the page with Daniel's name. Under his name were only a few words. Photographer, 35. Too observant, not who he says he is. She added one more line, dangerous. It wasn't just a suspicion. It was a certainty that grew with each passing day. She started looking. Lana was a master of control, and she knew how to find answers. She checked her phone, the one she used for her summer vacation. Nothing suspicious, no trace. But then she remembered the napkin Daniel had left at the shadow bar. She hadn't thrown it away, but hid it in a drawer, like a trophy that might come in handy. Lana pulled out the napkin with his number written on it and examined it closely. On the back, almost unnoticeably, were a few numbers, written in tiny handwriting, as if by accident. It wasn't a phone number. It was a code. Lana frowned, her fingers running over the paper. She knew Daniel was more than just a photographer. But the code on the napkin was more than that. It was a mark he'd left behind, perhaps intentionally. She pulled out her old laptop, the one she only used for special things, and began searching. The code turned out to be the password to an encrypted flash drive she'd found in the box of seeds he'd brought her. Lana hadn't noticed it at first, a tiny black rectangle hidden beneath the seed packets. She plugged the drive into her laptop, typed in the code, and the screen lit up with a folder containing a single file, an audio recording. She turned on the recording and her heart skipped a beat. It was her voice, recorded in the shadow bar. You are breaking my rules, Daniel. It is dangerous. His voice in response, I know, but isn't that the point of the game? Lana felt her fingers curl into fists. He was recording her. This wasn't just a glitch in her ritual. This was an intrusion. She kept looking and found another clue, a photograph, hidden in the same seed box. It was a shot of her house, taken from afar, across the street. In the background was her, standing in the garden, her figure illuminated by the morning sun. The picture had been taken a few days ago, before their meeting in the shadow. Lana felt her blood run cold. Daniel wasn't just breaking her rules. He was watching her. She sat in silence, looking at the photograph. Her mind was working fast, analyzing, putting the pieces together. Photographer? No. Detective. Or something worse. She remembered his questions, his gaze, his notebook. He wasn't just curious. He was a professional, and he knew what he was doing. But instead of panicking, Lana felt a strange thrill. He thought he was playing her, but she was a master at this game. And if he wanted to play, she would give him a chance. Lana took out a new SIM card from her hiding place and typed a message. Tomorrow, 9 p.m., Northern Star. Special evening. Don't be late. She sent it and broke the SIM card, as she always did. But this time her fingers trembled not from fear, but from anticipation. She knew that Daniel would understand. She had exposed him, and she knew that he would come. This was not just a meeting. This was a duel. She chose the North Star, a restaurant on the roof of a skyscraper with panoramic views of the city. This was her field, her stage, where she could control the light, the shadows, the space. She wanted him to feel under her gaze as she felt under his. But most of all, she wanted to know how far he was willing to go. Daniel received the message while sitting in his car, parked 2 blocks from her house. He read it 3 times, his fingers hovering over his phone. A special evening. He knew what that meant. She'd found the flash drive, the photo, the recording. She knew who he was, or at least suspected. He smiled, but his smile was less confident than before. Lana wasn't just an object to watch. She was an opponent worthy of him, and that made the game dangerous and exciting. He took out his notebook and wrote down, "She knows. She's going all in." He could have backed out, handed the photos over to Eric, and closed the case. But he didn't want to. Not because he was in love with her, he was too professional for that, but because she was a mystery he had to solve, even if it meant breaking all his rules. Daniel started the engine and drove away, but his thoughts were on Lana. He knew that tomorrow evening would not be just a meeting. It would be an exposure for both of them, and he decided to go all the way. Summer in the city had reached its peak, and the air was heavy, saturated with the smell of asphalt, flowers, and the anticipation of a storm. Lana stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, her fingers slowly sliding over the fabric of her dress, a scarlet, low-cut dress that she had chosen for a reason. It was not just an outfit, but a weapon, part of her arsenal for the evening she had called special. She knew Daniel would come. She knew he had taken her hint, and she knew that this evening would be their final duel, where everyone would go all in. Her summer vacation had always been her territory, her ritual, where she controlled every step, every look, every word. But Daniel, the 4th guest, was more than just a player. He was a mirror that reflected her own manipulations, her own shadows. The flash drive, the recording, the photograph, the evidence she found confirmed her suspicions. He was not a photographer, but a detective, and he might be working for Eric. But instead of backing down, Lana decided to up the ante. She invited him to a special evening, knowing he couldn't refuse. It was her game, and she was sure she would be the winner. The morning began with the usual routine, but Lana felt her nerves as taut as violin strings. She made coffee, cut fruit, adjusted the curtains, but her thoughts were occupied with Daniel. She remembered his gaze penetrating, almost predatory, his words that were both provocation and invitation. He pulled at her strings, and it angered her, but it also awakened something new in her, an excitement she could not ignore. The phone on the table rang, and Lana glanced at the screen. "Eric," she answered, her voice warm as the morning light poured into the kitchen. "Hello, darling," she said, her tone soft, almost maternal. "How are your bridges?" "Lan, I'm already starting to count the days until I return." Eric's voice was tired, but full of warmth. "This project is sucking all the energy out of me. How are you? Do you miss me?" Lana stepped out onto the veranda, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. She looked out at the garden, where the roses swayed in the gentle breeze, and smiled. "Of course I miss you," she replied, her voice like honey, enveloping and sweet. "But you know I'm busy. Roses, the house, all that." The neighbor's dog tried to dig under the fence again, but I chased him away. Eric laughed, and the sound was so familiar, so safe, that Lana felt guilty for a second, but she quickly pushed the feeling away. "You're my heroine," he said, and there was pride in his voice. "Listen, I was thinking. When I get back, maybe we could have dinner with friends. Sodomize, it's been a while since we've gotten together." "That's a good idea," she replied, her voice unwavering. "But you know I don't like big groups, just you and me." "Whatever you say," he chuckled, and there was only warmth in his tone. "Okay, I'll call tomorrow. Love you, Lan." "And I love you," she said, her voice perfect as always. She hung up and looked out at the garden. Her smile was gone, replaced by a cold glint in her eyes. Eric was her anchor, but Daniel was her challenge, and she was ready to face him. Lana spent the day preparing. She opened her stash, checked her SIM cards, her money, and her passports. Jack's folder lay at the bottom, a dark spot, but she didn't touch it. Today, her thoughts were on Daniel. She had chosen the North Star, a restaurant on the roof of a skyscraper with a panoramic view of the city where the lights sparkled like stars and the shadows were as deep as her secrets. This was her field, her stage, where she could control the light, the space, the atmosphere. She wanted Daniel to feel under her gaze as she felt under his. She put on a dress, applied makeup subtle but accentuating her eyes, which were her greatest weapon today. The scent of perfume that spicy, sandalwood scent enveloped her like a cloak. Lana looked at herself in the mirror, and her reflection smiled back at her, not Lana, not Layla, but something in between, ready for battle. She sent a message from the new SIM card. 21 o'clock, Northern Star. Don't be late. The answer came instantly. I'm never late. Lana broke the SIM card and threw it in the trash. It was her ritual, her way of erasing traces. But this time, she knew that Daniel had left his own, and she was ready to use them against him. The Northern Star was the epitome of luxury and restraint. Glass walls offered views of the city where the lights of skyscrapers shimmered like precious stones. Lana sat at a table near the edge, her back straight and her gaze attentive. She had chosen this spot for a reason. From here, she could see everyone who entered, and no one could approach her unnoticed. Her scarlet dress stood out against the dark tones of the restaurant like blood on black velvet. She was ready. Daniel arrived promptly at 9 p.m., his dark figure silhouetted against the glass doors. He was wearing a black suit, but no tie, with a top button of his shirt undone, giving him a casual yet confident air. His eyes found hers instantly, and Lana felt her pulse quicken slightly. He wasn't just a guest. He was an adversary, and she knew it. "Lana," he said, sitting down across from her. His voice was calm, but there was an energy to it, as if he were holding himself back. "A beautiful place. Your choice, as always, is impeccable." She smiled, her lips curling slightly, but her eyes were cold. "You know I like it when everything is under control," she replied, her voice soft but with sharp edges. "And you, Daniel, what do you like?" He leaned closer, his gaze catching her eyes. "I like the truth," he said, his tone light but menacing. "But you seem to prefer the shadows." Lana laughed, but her laughter was like the sound of breaking glass, beautiful but fragile. "Shadows? Maybe. But you know, Daniel, shadows can be very convincing." They ordered drinks, she a martini, he a whiskey. Their conversation began lightly. The city, the lights, the music that poured from the restaurant speakers. But Lana knew this was just a prelude. She felt the tension between them growing, as if the air between them was sparking. She decided to make the first move. "I found your flash drive," she said, her voice calm but steely. "And the recording, and the photo. You're not just a photographer, are you?" Daniel didn't flinch, didn't look away. He smiled, but his smile wasn't as open as before. "You're attentive," he said, taking a sip of whiskey. "I knew you'd find it. But you know, Lana, I'm not hiding." "Not really." She bowed her head, her eyes narrowed. "Then who are you? A detective? A spy? Or just a person who likes to play with fire?" He laughed, and his laugh was low, almost predatory. "And you?" he replied, his voice growing quieter. "Who are you, Lana? Or should I call you Layla?" Lana felt her heart skip a beat. He knew, or at least he suspected. She didn't show her surprise. Her face remained calm, but inside she was seething. He was closer to the truth than anyone else, and that made him dangerous. But instead of backing down, she decided to up the ante. Lila, she smiled, her voice like silk. It's an interesting name, but I'm Lana, and I don't like it when people dig into my past. And I don't like it when people play with me, he said, his gaze hard, but there was a spark in it, not anger, not a threat, but something Lana couldn't read. But you're right. This is a special night, so let's play fair, just once. Lana leaned closer, her eyes catching him. Honestly, her voice was almost a whisper. You think I don't know who hired you? Eric, right? He wants to know if I'm cheating on him, and you were supposed to have evidence. But instead, you're here. Why? Daniel didn't answer right away, his fingers running along the rim of his glass. Because you're more than just a case, he said finally, his voice low, almost intimate. You're a mystery, and I want to solve it. Lana felt her control waver. It wasn't just a compliment. It was a challenge. She knew he was playing her, just as she was playing him. But there was truth in his words, and that made him dangerous. She decided to change tactics. Then let's play, she said, her voice softer but still steely. But by my rules. One night, nothing more, and no questions about the past. He looked at her, his eyes dark, almost black in the restaurant light. What if I break the rules? He asked, his voice calm but threatening. Then you lose, she replied, her smile as sharp as a blade. And I never lose. They continued to talk, their words like swords, testing each other. Lana talked about her garden, but her words were filled with double meaning, as if she were talking about something more. Daniel talked about his photographs, but his stories were as evasive as hers. They were like two mirrors, reflecting each other, but neither showed the whole truth. You know what I've noticed? He said when their glasses were nearly empty. You always keep your distance, even now, when we're so close. Lana leaned closer, her lips inches from his. And you always ask too many questions, she replied, her voice like a whisper in the wind. But you know, Daniel, sometimes distance is what makes the game interesting. He didn't back down, his gaze was firm, but there was a spark in it, not passion, not desire, but something deeper. And if I want to close this distance, he asked, his voice low, almost threatening. Lana smiled, her eyes sparkling like the stars behind the glass wall of the restaurant. Then you must be prepared for the consequences. She stood up, her movements smooth but determined. Come on, she said, her voice firm but passionate. This evening isn't over yet. They walked out of the restaurant, and the night was cool and quiet. Lana led him to her car, parked in a dark alley. She knew it was a risk, but she also knew she had to see this game through. They got in, and Lana started the engine, but didn't move. She turned to him, her eyes like blades. You know who I am, she said, her voice calm but stormy. And I know who you are. But this is our night, and I want you to remember it. Daniel looked at her, his face unreadable. I'll remember, he said, his voice low, almost hoarse. But are you sure you're ready for what I'm about to see? She leaned closer, her lips almost touching his. I'm always ready, she replied, and her voice was like a fire that could burn everything in its path. They kissed, and it wasn't just a kiss, it was a war, each trying to gain the upper hand. Lana felt her control crumbling, but she didn't back down. She was Leela, she was Lana, she was the one who always won. But Daniel didn't give in, his hands were strong but careful, his gaze a mirror that reflected her own shadows. When they pulled away, their breathing was heavy and their eyes were bright. Lana knew this wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. She still thought she was the winner, she was in control. But somewhere deep inside, she knew that Daniel wasn't just a player. He was the one who could change the rules. The morning after the special evening at the Northern Star was deceptively calm. Lana awoke in her bedroom, surrounded by soft light filtering through the lace curtains. Her body was still warm from the night, but her mind was cold and clear as a blade. The encounter with Daniel had left a mark on her, not a wound, not a weakness, but a spark that had ignited a new game. He was not just an opponent, he was a mirror that reflected her own manipulations, and that made him dangerous. But Lana, or Leela, never backed down from danger. She simply changed the rules. She stood, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. The kitchen greeted her with its usual order: a gleaming countertop, neatly arranged spice jars, a vase of daisies she'd cut yesterday. Lana brewed coffee, but didn't drink it. Instead, she pulled out her phone, the one she'd used for Eric, and opened the video app. Her face in the reflection of the screen was calm, almost vulnerable, but her eyes were coldly calculating. This was her next move in a game where Daniel, Eric, and even she were pieces on the chessboard. Lana pressed record. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her hair slightly disheveled, her light robe making her look soft, almost fragile. She knew how to look sincere, how to make Eric believe. "Eric," she began, her voice quiet, with the slight tremor she'd honed over the years. "I have to tell you something. It's, it's hard for me to say this, but I can't stay silent any longer. I cheated on you. It was a mistake, a stupid thing, and I'm so sorry. I don't know how it happened, but I promise it's over. I want things to be like they were before. I'm sorry. I love you." She paused, her eyes slightly glistening not from tears, but from a drop of water she had discreetly placed on her lashes before recording. She turned off the camera, looked at the video, and smiled. This wasn't repentance. This was an act, and she was sure Eric would believe it. She sent the video, knowing it would reach him in a few hours, when he woke up in his hotel in a seaside town. Lana put her phone down and stepped out into the garden. The roses, her pride, swayed in the morning breeze, and she inhaled their scent, feeling her pulse calm. She had made her move. Now she had to wait for a reaction not just from Eric, but from Daniel as well. She knew he was a detective, that he worked for her husband, and this video was her way of taking the initiative. She had no intention of giving up her game, but she wanted them both to think she had backed down. This was her control, her power, and she was not going to lose it. Eric received the video late in the afternoon. He was sitting in his hotel room, surrounded by blueprints of the bridge that would become his pride and joy. His phone vibrated, and he opened the message, not expecting anything special. But when he saw Lana's face, her trembling voice, her words, his heart sank. He listened to the video 3 times, his fingers hovering over the screen. She was cheating on him. It was a blow, but her words, her promise, her tears, they were all so sincere that he couldn't help but believe it. "Lan," he whispered, looking at the screen. His voice was hoarse, full of pain, but there was hope in it. He loved her, no matter what, and her confession, her promise to stop, gave him a chance to get back the life he valued so much. He dialed Daniel, his detective, without wasting any time. His voice shook as he spoke. "Daniel, it's Eric," he said, his tone a mixture of weariness and relief. "I got the video from Lana. She confessed, said it was over. I think that's it. Thank you for your work." Daniel, sitting in his car a few blocks from Lana's house, listened in silence. His face was unreadable, but inside he felt something shift. He knew Lana better than Eric did. He knew that her video was not a confession, but a move in a game she played with the same precision with which she tended her garden. But he couldn't tell Eric that. Not because he was bound by contract, but because he wanted to see how far she would go. "I understand, Eric," he replied, his voice calm and professional. "I'm glad that clears things up. I'll send you an invoice." "Yes, of course," Eric sighed, and there was gratitude in his voice. "Thank you, Daniel. You did more than I expected." They said goodbye, and Daniel hung up. He looked at his notebook lying on the passenger seat. On the last page was written, "She knows. She's going all in." He added one more line, "The video is her move, but the game isn't over." He knew Lana hadn't backed down. She'd just taken things to the next level, and he was ready to respond. Lana spent the day in her garden, pruning roses and weeding. Her movements were fluid, almost meditative, but her mind was sharp as a blade. She waited for Eric to respond, but she waited even more for Daniel to react. She knew he had gotten her message, knew he had figured out her game, and she knew he wouldn't back down. In the evening, her phone rang. Eric. She answered, her voice soft, full of remorse. "Lan, I got your video," he said, his voice heavy but hopeful. I don't know what to say. That was hard to hear. But I believe you. I believe you want to make things right." Lana closed her eyes, her lips curling slightly into a smile. "Thank you, Eric," she replied, her voice quiet, almost trembling. "I'm so sorry, but I promise it won't happen again. I want things to be like they were before." "I want that too," he said, and there was a sincerity in his voice that made Lana feel guilty for a second. "I'll be back in a week. We'll talk about it, okay?" "Of course," she replied, her voice warm as the morning light. "I'm waiting for you." She hung up and looked at her reflection in the window. Her smile was cold as ice. Eric believed her. It was her first move, and it worked. Now all that was left was Daniel. Daniel received a bill from Eric the next day. The money arrived quickly, with a short note. "Thank you for everything. Case closed." He looked at the translation and grinned. Case closed for Eric, but not for him. Lana wasn't just an object of surveillance. She was a mystery he wanted to solve, and her video only confirmed that she was playing on another level. He gathered his things: camera, notebook, laptop, and got into his car. His apartment was in another city, and he knew he had to leave. Eric no longer needed his services, and Lana was too smart to let him stay. But he couldn't leave without making his final move. He pulled out his phone and dialed a message using a number she had never seen. "You play well, Lana, but the game is not over." He sent it, knowing she wouldn't answer. Then he started the engine and drove away, leaving her house, her garden, her shadows behind. But he knew he'd be back, not as a detective, but as a player who'd accepted her challenge. Lana received the message while watering her roses. She looked at the screen, her lips slightly curled. She knew that Daniel would not back down, and she was ready. Her summer vacation was over, but a new game was just beginning, and she was sure that she would remain the winner. Summer in the suburbs was ending, and the air was cooler, filled with the scent of dying flowers and the first fallen leaves. Lana stood in her garden, surrounded by roses that still held despite the approach of autumn. Her fingers gripped the pruning shears, but she did not cut the branches. She simply looked out at the garden, at the house, at the perfect world she had created. Her summer vacation was over, and with it another chapter of her game. But this year was different. Daniel, the fourth guest, had left a crack in her world, and although she had regained control, that crack had reminded her that power is not the absence of threats, but the ability to manage them. The morning was quiet, almost solemn. Lana walked into the kitchen, where everything was in its place. Shining dishes, neatly arranged spice jars, a vase of daisies she had cut yesterday. She brewed coffee, but did not drink it. Instead, she pulled out a metal box from its hiding place in the closet. This was her last ritual of the summer, closing the season, erasing her tracks, preparing for the next game. She opened the drawer, her fingers running over the contents: wads of cash, 3 passports with different names, an old gun she hadn't touched in years, and a box of SIM cards. She pulled them out, one by one, remembering the men they had been associated with: Christian, John, Stefan, Daniel. Each of them was part of her melody, her dance, but Daniel stood out. He wasn't just a note, he was a dissonance that made her rethink her game. Lana walked out into the yard, where in the corner of the garden sat a small metal brazier that she used to burn leaves. She dropped the SIM cards into the brazier, lit a match, and watched the flames consume the plastic, turning it to black ash. This was her ritual, her way of erasing traces, of letting go of the past. But this time, it felt different. Burning the SIM cards wasn't just the end of the season, it was an assertion of her power. She knew Daniel was a threat, but she had dealt with him. She sent the video to Eric, making him believe in her repentance, and in doing so, neutralized the detective. Eric paid him, the case was closed, and Daniel left. But his last message, "You play well, Lana, but the game is not over," still sounded in her head. She went back into the house and pulled out a new flash drive from the drawer, not the one Daniel had left, but one she had prepared herself. It contained recordings of her conversations with him, made secretly during their meetings. Lana was always prepared, always one step ahead. She knew Daniel might come back, and this flash drive was her insurance, her trump card in case he decided to continue the game. She put the flash drive in the drawer, next to Jack's file, which was still waiting for its time. Lana hadn't opened it since he came, but she knew she would have to soon. Her past, her Leela, did not leave her, and she was ready to face it. Lana stepped out onto the veranda, her gaze slid across the garden. The phone on the table rang, and she answered, knowing it was Eric. "Hello, darling." Her voice was warm as the morning light poured into the garden. "How are you?" "Lan, I'm already packing." Eric's voice was full of relief. "I'll be home in a couple of days. I'm still thinking about your video. Thank you for being honest. We'll get through this, right?" Lana smiled, her eyes shining, not from tears, but from cold calculation. "Of course we can," she replied, her voice soft, almost maternal. "I'm waiting for you, Eric. We'll start all over again." "I want that too," he said, and there was a sincerity in his voice that made Lana feel a twinge of guilt for a second. But she quickly pushed it away. "I love you, Lan." "And I love you," she said, her voice perfect as always. She hung up and looked at her reflection in the window. Her smile was not the one she gave Eric. It was Leela's smile, sharp, predatory, full of power. Lana returned to the garden, her fingers tightening on the new flash drive she had pulled from her pocket. She knew Daniel was gone, but his shadow remained. He had been the first to challenge her, to see Leela behind Lana's mask. And though she had won that game, she knew he could return. But now she was ready. Control was not the absence of threats, but the ability to manage them, and Lana had learned that better than anyone. She looked at the roses that were still blooming despite the end of summer, and her lips curved into a smile. Next summer will be even more interesting. She knew it, and she was ready. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.